Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome to the stage William Murdoch, Executive Director of the Mid-Ohio Regional Planning Commission.
Well, good morning. Good morning. I'm William Murdoch. I'm the Executive Director of the Mid-Ohio Regional Planning Commission, also known as MORPC. And if you don't know us, MORPC is made up of over 60 local governments and regional organizations in Central Ohio. Working together to make our region a better place is what we're all about. So my MORPC journey started 5 years ago. Time goes quickly. I'm humbled to work every day with smart community leaders and an excellent team, and together we've accomplished a lot about the things that we care about: sustainability, better transportation, good planning, planning tools, policy. For me, these are lifelong interests. And like many of you, my family roots lie in transportation in the Midwest. My family's worked for GM and Ford and Burroughs, and they always love to talk about transportation, especially cars. How they look, how cars drive, whether electric vehicles are really coming, and smart mobility, well, let's just say technology's also been a regular feature of our family dinner table, because way back in the 1970s, my dad started in IT as a computer programmer, and you can imagine our house. Stacks of punch cards, floppy disks, half-built PCs, and we played Atari and Pong, and I learned how to program BASIC on a Commodore VIC-20. And later, when I got interested in planning, video games, or you might call them technology teaching tools, like SimCity, were a natural fit for me. And if you don't know this game, it lets you reimagine and develop communities by trying out different scenarios for growth, building roads and trains and parks. And it might sound a little bit like some of the tools that MORPC uses, except with no actual people and no real community impact. And so I became a planner so that when we use these tools, we can have real tangible impacts on our communities and on our environment. Now, you may know that my public service career started in the city of Gahanna, and woohoo! And one of our biggest projects was to clean up an abandoned brownfield. And if you didn't know this site, it was poisoning the Big Walnut Creek. It was scaring away development until local government leaders and public and private partners came together with smart planning and science and technology to fix it. And for me, it was the first time I learned the real impact a local government can have in preparing a community for its future. And now every day, with all of you at MORPC, I see this in 60 communities around Central Ohio and the impact they have. And now you know a little bit about why I'm so energized about our work, to grow up around computer punch cards and video games and car talk, and now be working alongside you on smart cars and scenario planning and sustainability. Well, this is pretty incredible for me. Transportation, technology, the environment, these are all top of mind in Central Ohio these days, and they're central to our work with our communities. Because what's leading the conversation in Central Ohio right now wasn't even on our agenda 5 years ago. Development pressures across the region, demographic changes, smart driving cars, smart transportation, mobility, Hyperloop, shared mobility, traffic and transit are now a leading concern of our business community, and significant growth makes it all the more urgent. Our region is looking at incredible, sustained growth, over 100,000 new people just in the last 5 years. And with Insight 2050, we know we're on track to grow to 3 million. We're seeing changing demographics, growth from across the country and abroad, a growing population under 35 and a doubling over 65. Everyone expects more options in transportation and housing, and growth is coming at a time of disruptive change in technology and development trends. But we shouldn't fear this growth or this change. We should plan for it, so we're adding value to our communities. To paraphrase former Mayor Holman of Columbus, a place that rides it out stands still, a place that stands still falls behind, and falling behind is not an option. Mayor Holman was right. Status quo communities that ignore change or fear technology or fear development are stifling their own prosperity. I think that what's driving Central Ohio's growth is our culture of being smart and open to new ideas. And this Columbus way where public and private leaders are charting a shared path forward, I think that our growth is because we have an attitude that is positive. It's our competitive advantage. And Central Ohio is a place to be if you want to impact the future. And during this period of change, you can depend on MORPC for the things that we've always done, bringing Central Ohio together like today around the table to prepare for growth with smart tools and objective data. And we work on long-term relationships. We build them one conversation at a time with community and business leaders in urban neighborhoods, rural areas, and suburbs. And if you let me look back at the last 5 years, there's some really great examples. Union County Commissioner Steve Stolte wanted to better prepare our rural areas for their transportation needs and growth. And so we helped create and staff a new transportation planning effort for 7 rural counties. For the first time, our whole region has access to advanced tools so we can be ready for growth in new technology and transportation. Another good idea came from Delaware City Manager Tom Holman, who wanted to provide communities just $5 more from license plates to secure the safety of our roads. Our team helped him start a policy effort that led to state legislation for counties, and now this idea could mean millions more for Central Ohio's roads, and we think it should expand to cities and townships too. MORPC members know that to better compete as a region, we don't all need to grow the same way, but we do need to be strategically working together. And so with our partners at Columbus 2020, community and business leaders, and good folks like Holly Matty of Violet Township or Delaware County Commissioner Jeff Benton, we created the Competitive Advantage Initiative. This is identifying our priority infrastructure needs over 10 counties, and we went a step further by dedicating staff member to go after project funding so we can be assertive about the projects we need to prepare ourselves for the future. I think that looking forward, it's really important we don't get lost in the excitement of growth and the shine of new technology. You know, federal and state resources aren't giving us enough to maintain our basic infrastructure, let alone investing what we need to get ahead of our quick growth and changing tech. And even with our growth, the economic benefits aren't felt in every part of our region. And our efforts with technology, well, they need to have broad impact throughout the region or else they risk being no different than a video game. Planning for better impact. That's why we're studying the Rickenbacker area, and we've got a dozen community partners here who are working with us. As part of this study, our team surveyed riders of the Great Community Shuttle, which is an incredible and impactful community service. But we also saw the region's growing economic disparity firsthand. If you don't know, this area has many unfilled jobs due in part to that transportation disconnect between where the jobs are and where our workforce can afford to live. Our team listened to workers' stories, including some homeless individuals who, get this, carry their bags with all of their belongings so they can work 2 jobs along the route before heading back to wherever they spend the night. Think about that. Every day, many others commute 2 or more hours or driving solo or on transit to take hours away from their families just to access those jobs. Can we really say we're a smart region for transportation if it's so challenging for those who depend on transit to get to work from where they can afford to live? We can't expect to fill jobs if it's so difficult and expensive to get there with or without a car. And we think this is an urgent economic issue, and you know that MORPC and CODA and Smart Columbus and our communities are all working on this and developing new solutions, but you should get involved too if you're not. There's more to do, and we all need to be advocating for more resources for transit and transportation investments. It's too important to our future. You know, energy solutions are another way that we can address our region's toughest issues, and Franklin County has a first-of-its-kind energy study with MORPC, and this is showing very clearly the stark burden that energy costs have on our workforce and our most vulnerable families. And there's a lot of work to do, but fortunately, we have a team at MORPC who is continuing to help households in need deal with these issues by making homes safer and more efficient with weatherization and energy efficiency and home repair. And if you didn't know this, we've done this in thousands of homes over 30 years thanks to strong partnerships. And it's not just about energy efficiency, this is making our region more competitive, one family at a time. I think that working together as a region is more urgent than ever, and a community just can't go it alone if we're going to compete as a region. Recently the mayor talked of the urgency around growth and technology to address our most pressing issues. But which mayor? This is the fun part of my job at MORPC. We work with all of them. Mayor Ginther at Columbus talks about smart mobility, creating opportunity, and solving problems like infant mortality. Mayor Ward of Lockburn and Mayor Johnson of Somerset talk about the urgency of reinvigorating small towns by better connecting them to the region. And Mayor Neeland of Gahanna, if you know him, he talks about data and technology. And it's no different for other mayors, commissioners, trustees, and council members, from Liberty Township to Grove City and more. And MORPC's initiatives for 2018 are reflecting that urgency, and that's what we're working on for our members. And this is why we launched the Smart Region Task Force recently. And with this, we're aiming to build upon the really great work at Smart Columbus so we can connect innovations to every neighborhood in every county in Central Ohio. And we're really excited it includes a Smart Streets initiative. And so for those of you who remember, Complete Streets did this for pedestrians and bikes. Smart Streets will link regional smart priorities in transportation with our transportation investments so we can connect data-enabled infrastructure and smart mobility in ways that are new throughout the region. We know from our work with Insight 2050 that we're projecting growth, but Insight 2050 also showed us the benefits of compact development through infill and redevelopment, and how smaller residences in walkable mixed-use areas reduce congestion, improve our air quality, and decrease household costs. But we need to respond to changing markets differently because of our change and our growth. And so we need new tools and new strategies so that we can accommodate 3 million people and still keep a good quality of life. So to do that, we recently launched Insight 2050 Corridor Concepts. And this is a great project. It's assessing current and future development patterns to start with 5 major development corridors. We're working with communities, nonprofit, and business leaders on the policies and the infrastructure you need for growth and for high-capacity transit. We also recently launched the Rapid Speed Transportation Initiative, and if you don't know it, haven't read about it, game-changing tech like Hyperloop is coming. This is a new way that you can move freight and people up to 700 miles an hour. It's designed to be efficient and affordable, and in 2016, MORPC and the Columbus Partnership proposed a route from Pittsburgh, Columbus to Chicago called Midwest Connect. And this was in the Hyperloop One Global Challenge. And you know what? We won. We're one of only 10 corridors globally out of 2,600 that get to work on this technology. Imagine how transformative 20-minute travel times to Chicago or Pittsburgh or Lima could be for our region and for our workforce. You know, we're taking it a step further too by also studying existing technology with high-speed passenger rail too, because no matter the technology, the impact of connecting to other regions in new ways should be a priority for a growing region like us. And while we're reaching for the stars with new technology, we're also keeping our feet on the ground with people-powered transportation. And I tell you what, it's no less bold. We've studied our trail infrastructure, and if you use it, you know that use of our regional greenways is soaring. But even with over 200 miles of trails, there's significant demand for more and an urgent need to connect better to minority neighborhoods and rural areas throughout the region. And fortunately, we're working with Central Ohio Greenways to help improve health and a quality of life with a strategy to fill those gaps. And it's part of Sustainable 2050, which is supporting our community's sustainability efforts with technical assistance and collaboration. And if you haven't been following this, we're focused on community impact and financial impact and environmental impact, and we're working closely to benchmark and track the progress of our sustainability goals. Over 30 communities joined in the first year, and if you haven't yet, you should consider it. You know, one of the things that I love most about Central Ohio is while we're really quick to celebrate our successes, we really believe our best days are still in front of us. And you know, last week I read a planning article, and I'm going to tell you about it. An author described the, quote, incredibly suffocating state of mind and the relentless negativity that so many stagnating regions are facing. It warned about being overly pragmatic and discouraging new ideas. And while that's not necessarily us, I think there's a lesson for us that we shouldn't take our success for granted if our best days really are to come. Are we bold enough to tackle our biggest challenges on poverty and equity while still thinking positively and big about the future? We embrace the Columbus way, but do we do enough to encourage robust ideas and good discussion? No region thrives for very long if ideas only come from the top, or Ivy League experts, or DC think tanks. These are good for inspiration and perspective, of course, but they won't have sustained impact unless we also trust and nourish and engage the thriving and authentic leaders like the 800 of you in this room. We need to have a culture that empowers your voices and tap into our region's talent if we're gonna solve our big challenges. There's an old adage, if your voice isn't at the table, you can't be heard. And we invite you to the table to be a part of the conversation. MORPC is looking for new voices and diverse voices from every county and every corner of the region, and we're launching an effort this year to do just that, so that everybody's in the discussion, because when they are, we think our region is best positioned for the future. You know, our growth means that more than ever, we need new perspective, and especially new perspective on old challenges. And in 2018, you're gonna hear that MORPC is kicking off a strategic plan for transportation through 2050. This is the time for our strategic planning and bold strokes so that we can move our whole community forward. And we should think big. We should have a big impact. Why not? Our region is on a roll. We're growing. There's so much excitement. Why not go after the Smart Cities Challenge? Our region did. We won. And now $40 million leverages $500 million of impact in Linden and transit and business. Why not go after the Hyperloop Challenge? We did. Our corridor won. And now we're taking the next steps to make it happen and have a real impact on our workforce and our economy. Why not leverage the Transportation Research Center and Honda and local partners from Dublin and Marysville and Union and Logan counties and more on a 33 smart mobility corridor? If you haven't followed this, they did that, and now they're leading globally with $200 million of investment and new jobs. Why not aim higher for the Rickenbacker area with incredible global connections in 15 different weekly flights to other continents? The sky really is the limit, and our area study on Rickenbacker this year will set big goals for workforce housing and sustainability and transportation. And why not be audacious enough to declare that transit should come with your job? Many of us get a free parking space. Why not a transit pass? We're doing that in this region. Public and private partners worked with CODA and MORPC in the Special Improvement District downtown and Smart Columbus to help 45,000 people in downtown Columbus access transit in June. This could be a national model to use transit to fill offices and reduce parking shortages, encourage smart mobility, and we don't even have to build a parking garage. So, as we move into 2018, you can tell I'm excited. I think we should all be excited. We should think big about Central Ohio's future. Why wouldn't we? We've got the growth that creates the opportunity. We've got the culture that powers the idea and the collaboration for big impacts. And MORPC, well, we're here to help you get started. To our members, and there are a lot of you here today, we appreciate it. MORPC's here for you. Local governments working together to make Central Ohio a better place. But we all know that working in local government isn't easy. You get a title you're elected to or hired for, you got a job description and goals to accomplish, but more often than not, all other items as assigned is your top priority. So you gotta be flexible and creative and hopefully have a sense of humor, and most of all, you need everyone at the table, businesses, nonprofits, all sorts of voices. You gotta be patient, but keep focused on what you're trying to accomplish. And I want you to know that our job at MORPC is to help you with those conversations, to have your back, and to give you the resources that you need to make your job and all those other duties as assigned just a little bit easier. So, thank you for being a part of our conversation today. Thank you for being a part of the State of the Region. I'd like to move on by introducing our brand new MORPC board chair. We are so fortunate to have one of Central Ohio's best voices for pushing strategy and new ideas. And you'd expect something like this from a recent 40 under 40 honoree. So Rory is a great friend. He's a great advisor to all of us, has important roles at the City of Columbus and Adam H. on their board. And I'd like us to welcome new MORPC Chair, Rory McGinnis.
Thank you, William. I'm honored to address you today as MORPC's new chair. I have big shoes to fill in trying to live up to the example that Matt Greason and Eric Phillips have set while I have been an officer on the executive committee. For those that don't know me, I'd like to share a bit of my background. I'm a deputy director in the City of Columbus Department of Development, and one of the roles that I have is that I'm the liaison to the Columbus Regional Airport Authority. I've been engaged in transportation and regional collaboration since I started with the City of Columbus in 2010. I began in the Department of Public Service and helped refine the city's process for designing and constructing infrastructure to support public-private partnership projects. In 2012, I moved over to the mayor's office, serving in various roles, including Deputy Chief of Staff. I also served as liaison to the Department of Public Service and became a member of the MORPC Executive Committee. Most of all, I had the privilege of working on the Long Street Bridge and Smart Columbus projects that demonstrate how transportation can reconnect communities and increase ladders of opportunity. MORPC played a critical role in both of these projects. Before 2014, the Long Street Bridge was a textbook example of how the development of our nation's highway system divided communities and contributed to the isolation and dramatic decline of many neighborhoods. Unfortunately, this isolation disproportionately impacted minority communities across the nation, as it did to the King Lincoln District in our city. When the city, ODOT, and MORPC began planning the improvements to improve 7071, they invested the resources to make sure that the overpass bridges that span the highway would reconnect our neighborhoods. These bridges would be pedestrian-friendly, with wide sidewalks, nice landscaping, attractive lighting, and have the ability to accommodate future redevelopment like you see over the cap over I-670 here in the short north. The Long Street Bridge was prioritized as an area of special investment, and through a strong community engagement process, a cultural wall was created to highlight the people and institutions that contributed to the rich history of the community. Smart Columbus will show our region, nation, and the world a practical path to implementing intelligent transportation systems in our communities. While still early in the program schedule, Columbus is well underway executing its smart city investment by working with end users, stakeholders, and partners, including MORPC, to define specific parameters around each of the 9 Smart Columbus grant projects. MORPC looks forward to continuing to work with Smart Columbus to utilize mobility and technology to enhance opportunity for all of our residents. In addition, given the rapid onset of data-centric technologies such as connected and autonomous vehicles, MORPC is developing a more coordinated approach to addressing regional data needs. This year, MORPC will release an agenda that defines the agency's role as a regional data entity and outlines specific goals and objectives that we will pursue to develop new data resources, promote good data policies, and ensure data equity, access, and inclusivity for all Central Ohio residents. Our region is experiencing economic and population growth at a pace unsurpassed at any time in our history. Urban affairs analyst Aaron Wren describes the state of our region best. Columbus is a place where it's obvious that ambition can be realized. Columbus is both operating from a baseline of strength and also at a point where it is still on its way up as a city. Columbus has never been a larger, more important, more prominent city in the world than it is right now, and it has the potential to reach still higher. Not every city and not every generation is granted the opportunity that Columbus has right now. But with this growth, development, and opportunity come great responsibility to maintain good public and private policies to ensure that we are providing greater ladders of opportunity, accessibility to all, and sustainable development. Through dialogue, transparency, and involvement, we will build a region that is open to all, and most importantly, a region we all feel proud to call home. At this time, I'd like to recognize and thank outgoing Chair Matt Greason, City Manager for the City of Worthington, for his outstanding leadership and dedication to MORPC.
Matt has been a catalyst for this organization. First of all, he knows his stuff. He's a very smart man, but he talks to you in a way that you can open up to him and bring that human element out.
He's always working to make things easy and make things correct.
Matt approaches everything with his feet on the ground, but lets us reach for the stars.
Some of the more notable projects that I can think of is his work on Insight 2050.
He's also helped us with sustainability, with energy studies. We even took a bold bet on something transformative with Hyperloop.
You just don't bring a project like that to Central Ohio not having the foresight to figure out how to make this happen.
He helps us think things through, and he does so in a way that many people think is always serious, but he has that sense of humor that just makes it all that much more meaningful and that much more fun to work with him as our chairperson.
Matt introduced me to the term sticky wickets.
In my job interview, he used the phrase sticky wicket and said, "How are you gonna solve a sticky wicket at work?" And it was hard to keep a straight face not knowing what a sticky wicket was.
You know, bunch of sticky wickets over here. We got to make sure that we deal with that. And I'm sitting there like, okay, sticky wickets, I got to figure out what that is.
But that's the kind of humor and charm that he brings to his leadership style, and it makes it more fun to know him and to work with him.
I really think that his love for governing began as he was growing up watching his dad. His family is just the number one thing in his life, as it should be.
Oh, I'm proud of my dad for always being there for me.
He's always loved government and like the history and everything, so I've learned some of the history of old Worthington.
He's taught me how to give back to like the food pantry.
He always perseveres, even though he has to sometimes work late.
When he brings that personal touch, that personal insight into how this is important to families, how it's important to his family and the region, that's meant a lot to us as we've tried to get us ready for growth.
First, a shout out to the City of Gahanna table. My name is Karen Angelou, and I serve as a Gahanna City Council member and Vice Chair of the Mid-Ohio Regional Planning Commission. The first of our 3 distinguished awards to be presented is this Regional Leadership Award. The Regional Leadership Award recognizes people in our 15-county region who make extraordinary efforts for the future of our communities. This award represents MORPC's dedication to addressing issues that go beyond community boundaries and that embrace visionary thinking. This year's winner is Curtis Stitt, former CEO of CODA. Please join us on stage.
Innovative,
passionate,
inspirational,
transformative. All words to describe Curtis Stitt and his 18 years serving the Central Ohio Transit Authority. With Curtis, it's always been about more than getting people from A to B. It's about addressing need, connecting people to jobs and the community, really getting to know the people you serve. During his time as president and CEO, Curtis led the efforts to launch C-Bus, the free downtown circulator that celebrated more than 1 million trips just 2 years after its launch. He also worked to add free public Wi-Fi to all buses, connecting the airport to downtown with the Air Connect shuttle and was key in bringing CMAX, CODA's first bus rapid transit, online. Under his leadership, CODA redesigned the entire bus network, laying the foundation for the future of public transit. Limited only by his imagination, Curtis truly embodies the collaborative spirit of the Central Ohio region.
Our next award is the William H. Anderson Excellence in Public Service. This award recognizes a past or present board member who has made a significant contribution to MORPC, the community, and our region. William H. Anderson, a longtime MORPC board member, was the epitome of a civic volunteer who is remembered for his zeal with which he championed MORPC's mission and goals. And this year's winner is James Shimmer, Franklin County Director of Economic Development and Planning.
You know, Jim has served as in economic development for the city of Columbus and now Franklin County. He has also given a lot of time back to Economic Development 411, which is the annual Economic Development Summit for the region. Can't say enough about his involvement, his engagement, his thoughtfulness, and how he puts all that together.
He's one of those passionate regional leaders that really, truly wants the betterment of our region.
He's always asking the questions, how can we make it better for the future? How can we make developments more sustainable? How can we look at the long run of decisions and not just the short run?
He's not all about business or the bottom line. He really wants to understand where people are in life and improve their situation.
His questions are sometimes just from the heart. He wants to know the truth, and he's willing to have those hard discussions because he feels moving the ball forward is important for the region.
He is a champion for mentoring young professionals. He's a cheerleader for the underdog, and he has a really great sense of humor. He makes a lot of jokes.
And sometimes they're even funny.
Right.
Jim actually thinks he's a comedian. But actually, he's not as funny as he thinks he is.
He always tries to be funny. And sometimes he's successful, sometimes he's not. But that's what we love about him, because I think he's always someone who is willing to break the ice, to make people feel comfortable, and to have a good time.
He is one of those leaders that you can go up and have a conversation.
He is a positive person who wants to help out when he can.
When you talk to him, this is the real Jim. And he just really cares about the region. He cares about the people he works with. He's really thoughtful in his approach.
I think that's one of his biggest assets because he reminds each of us what's really important in life.
Well, good afternoon. My name is Eric Janus, and I'm a Deputy County Administrator for the Franklin County Board of Commissioners and current MORPC Secretary to the Board. Today, I have the honor of presenting our final award of the day, the William C. Habig Collaborative Award. This honor represents outstanding effort and innovation in creating partnerships and sharing resources. The award captures the dedication to collaboration of Bill Habig. Bill served as MORPC's Executive Director for more than 30 years, and yet today he continues to serve the region as a MORPC board member representing Granville Township. This year's award goes to Delaware City, Delaware Community Center YMCA, and the National Guard Readiness Center. I'd invite those representatives to please come up on stage.
Do you ever get that feeling?
You just get a feeling when you come in like there's really something special here?
That feeling that you belong.
It's friendly, it's open. I mean, it just kind of feels like home away from home.
That feeling that you're a part of something great. That's this place.
This came about really as a result of a need that the community identified years ago for a community center.
A need. That's where it started. A need shared by the City of Delaware, the YMCA, and the Army National Guard for a multi-use facility. A place for everyone.
The community reaction from day one has been overwhelmingly positive.
Delaware City Manager Tom Holman says that's exactly what his community got.
But the end result is a facility that the city really had known that they had a need for, and now has added tremendous quality of life for our community.
Do you ever get that feeling? That feeling that together we can create something wonderful?
The community is, I think, very fortunate to have this collaboration. I always ask people, what did the community do before the Y and the city got together and had this beautiful facility built?
In Delaware, there's a feeling. It embraces the greater good.
The community relationship is what's really made this great. The chance for all of us to work together.
It empowers and builds strong connections.
I just like it. It kind of builds a community around everyone. It's kind of a center for everyone to get to know someone.
It unifies an entire community.
And when I come into this facility, it just feels like home. It feels like a community that cares about each other. And that's what the YMCA partnering with the National Guard is all about.
A true collaboration, bringing together leaders, the community, the people who make it all worthwhile. A testament to the commitment of local government to serve its residents. And that is a good feeling to have.
Okay. At this time, it is my great pleasure to introduce our next speaker. Since becoming CEO and president of the Columbus Downtown Development Corporation, or CDDC, in 2007, Guy Worley has led successful public-private partnerships, creating city-changing and award-winning civic projects in downtown Columbus. Projects such as the Scioto Mile, Scioto Greenways, and Columbus Commons have opened to excellent reviews to visitors and residents alike. These developments have created green space and cultural attractions that have revitalized the heart of the capital city. As a result, downtown Columbus's residential and employer population is rising, and the enthusiasm has catalyzed over $400 million in additional private investments. Because of his successful track record, Guy was chosen to lead the development of the new National Veterans Memorial and Museum, a landmark institution in the heart of downtown Columbus. Guy has more than 25 years of outstanding leadership, management, and financial experience. Prior to joining CDDC, he served as Chief of Staff to Columbus Mayor Michael B. Coleman and as County Administrator for the Franklin County Board of Commissioners. Let's give a warm welcome to the CEO and President of the Columbus Downtown Development Corporation, Guy Worley.
Thank you, Eric. Good afternoon. Thank you. Again, I'm Guy Worley, the CEO of the Columbus Downtown Development Corporation, or CDDC, and it's my pleasure to be here today. The theme of today's program couldn't be more appropriate for the future of Central Ohio. At CDDC, we know a thing or two about growth, development, and opportunity. We've had the privilege to partner with the public and private sectors to lead many projects that have transformed downtown Columbus. Projects such as the Columbus Commons, the Scioto Mile, the Scioto Greenways, which combine added 50 acres of urban open space and draw millions of people downtown each year. These amenities have been catalysts to garner more than $400 million in private sector investment to build residential and commercial buildings in the River South neighborhood, where there was only once a sea of parking lots. Most importantly, the development has fortified our downtown, created the kind of environment that makes people proud of our community, and have led to an explosion of people living, working, and playing downtown. But why do we need a strong downtown? Because to be a strong region, you need to be anchored by a strong downtown. To have a strong downtown, you need to be anchored by a strong region. So I want to thank MORPC for all of the good work that they do for our region. And I think we should give William Murdoch and his team and all of the elected officials and the board members of MORPC another round of applause. This type of exponential growth takes innovation, forward thinking, and collaboration. That's the Columbus way, where leaders like MORPC, the mayor, city council, the county commissioners, state legislative leaders, and business executives all work together to get things done. But we're not done. CDDC is bringing the same energy and successful model of public-private partnerships to downtown's next great neighborhood, the Souda Peninsula. This will truly be a place where commerce and culture meet, where offices are built beside cultural amenities, where retail will connect with green space, and where energy and activity will flourish. Along the Souda Riverfront downtown, we've already seen public-private partnerships totaling $275 million in key investments, creating amenities like the new American Museum of Natural History at COSI, the Souda Peninsula Park and Garage, both which opened this past November to rave reviews, and the new National Veterans Memorial Museum, which will honor our country's 40 million veterans, of which 22 million are living with us today, scheduled to open later this year. And that's just the start. The mixed-use development of residential, retail, office, and hotels will bring additional investment of hundreds of millions of dollars and will create a cultural destination for the Midwest. Creating vibrant communities where residents want to live, work, and play is something our keynote speaker is very familiar with. Jennifer Keesmaat, the former chief planner for the City of Toronto, is passionate about creating places where people flourish. Named one of the most powerful people in Canada by Maclean's and one of the most influential by Toronto Live, she spent 5 years as Toronto's chief city planner, where she is celebrated for her innovative and collaborative approach to city building. Now a distinguished visitor in residence at the University of Toronto, Keesmaat shares her vision for cities of the future and her belief in inspired leadership. Over the past 15 years, Jennifer has worked in municipalities across Canada on urban design guidelines, official plan reviews, and university campus master plans. Her planning practice has been characterized by an emphasis on collaborations across sectors and broad engagement with municipal staff, councils, developers, business leaders, and non-governmental organizations. Jennifer is a graduate of the University of Western Ontario and has a master's degree in environmental studies from York University. Please join me in welcoming to the stage Jennifer Keesmaat.
Thank you very much, Guy. William began by talking about the best years being before Central Ohio. I actually believe our best years in Toronto are before us as well. I believe your best years are before you, but there are strategic choices that you need to make. It's not a done deal. Your best years are not before you in an inevitable kind of way, like they will just happen. Your best years will be before you as a region based on the choices that you make today. And what I'd like to talk to you in this presentation about is how you can capitalize on your growth to ensure a prosperous region for all. A prosperous region for all. You can capitalize on growth to deliver that, or not. You could just grow, and your grow, in fact, could take away from your overall objective of prosperity that is, in fact, something that is shared. And I'd like to use a little bit of the narrative of the Toronto story. I'm going to tell you some of the things we got right and some of the things we got wrong. We're a little bit out ahead of you, but our best years are still yet to come as well. Now, I'd like to get a bit of a sense how many of you have in fact visited Toronto, only because I haven't stumbled upon that many people in the past 24 hours that have. Throw your arm up into the air. Okay, there you all are. You were not at dinner last night. It's great to have you in the room today, so you will ensure that I'm telling the truth in my story. You can compare it with your experience of the city. But we're a city. The actual city is an amalgamated city. It was amalgamated 15 years ago. We are a city of 2.8 million people. The region is a region of about 8 million people. We are growing as a city by 400,000 people. Sorry, as a city by 40,000 people, and as a region by 100,000 people on an annual basis. Those are the bodies that we're bringing into the city. And we, in fact, share something in common with Ohio, with Central Ohio, and it's this. We are welcoming. We are welcoming. We welcome others. This is a key characteristic of who we are, and I've seen this welcoming demeanor, this sense of hospitality, this openness to people and ideas is something that is very clearly embedded in your DNA in Ohio. And as a result, I think you might want to consider the possibility that you're going to exceed your growth targets, that you're going to grow even more than you're planning for. Because districts, regions, cities that are open and welcoming to new people, new ideas, new technologies, to innovation will in fact win the future. You might just be on the cusp of unprecedented growth. You might. And if you are, how do you plan for that? I'm going to show you a little bit about what we've been doing. We've exceeded all of our growth targets, blew them out of the water. I'll show you what that looks like. And we are contending with the reality that this high growth scenario is in fact the new normal. So for those of you who haven't been to Toronto, you can see us in the middle of the map there, nicely nestled in the 5 Great Lakes. We're right on Lake Ontario. Lake Erie is just to the south of us. You can, of course, see where Chicago is located on Lake Michigan. So we are in a resource-rich environment very close to your border. We're also a capital city. We have a tremendously diverse economy. We are the 3rd largest manufacturing hub in North America. We are the 2nd largest tech hub after Silicon Valley in North America. We're the 4th largest city in North America, just having recently surpassed Chicago. Chicago and Toronto were founded around the same time, and Chicago has not seen the same kind of growth that Toronto has seen over the course of the past decade, and we just tipped the scales and have become larger than Chicago. So this is a defining characteristic of who we are. We have an extremely diverse economy, which means we are highly resilient to shocks, and particularly global shocks. It's always surprising to an American audience when I say that we, in fact, we didn't experience the 2008 or 2009 recession. We didn't. It just didn't happen. Our financial industry took a hit, in part because it's tied so closely to New York. But overall, we kept building and growing, and house prices didn't decline. And that has to do with the diversity of our economy in our city. And it is a critical way of building in resilience in our cities. Now, another very important part of our narrative as a city that I would be remiss if I didn't talk about is this 2 million acre greenbelt that you see that swaths our entire region. The built up area is in the yellow. The greenbelt is the areas where we've said we will not grow. We're not going to continue to sprawl indefinitely. And if you've been to Toronto, you'll know that we have a tremendous amount of sprawl. But we are recognizing that we can capitalize on growth by becoming something different. Just because we sprawled in the past, and we also are an auto-dominated region with massive car manufacturing plants having been the bedrock of our economy for many generations. But we realized that if we wanted to own the future, if we wanted to be resilient in the future, if we wanted to have economic prosperity in the future, that we needed to become something different. And that meant planning our land in a different way. It meant becoming more urban. thinking about how we could in fact grow, but ensure that we were reducing our environmental footprint, our carbon footprint, and offering a higher quality of life. The quality of life could in fact go up as we became denser. So that links back to this policy framework at the regional scale, which is our green belt. So, you know, we do tend to feel like we have a few bragging rights in Toronto. The truth is, we're kind of going on a popularity thing right now. A lot of people are coming to the city, and we only know we're popular because the New York Times says we are. We're Canadians. We look for outside affirmation. The BBC, there's some headlines here from the BBC as well. People are talking about our city in part because of the way we're changing, not because we're doing the things the way we've done them in the past. And I'll show you what some of those changes are. Downtowns have been growing. They're in vogue again on an international scale, particularly across North America. Well, we, in fact, are right now capitalizing. It's taken until now. We're capitalizing on a policy framework we put in place 40 years ago. And it had to do with a few things. It had to do with density, transit, and infill. So today, 250,000 people live in our downtown core, and we're adding about 15,000 people on an annual basis right into the core of the city, just in the 17 square kilometers that makes up the downtown of the city. This is adding a tremendous amount of vibrancy, but it's doing something else. It turns out that investment follows the people. Investment follows the millennials. So we are seeing national headquarters from around the globe wanting to locate in our downtown. Why? Because young people are moving into our downtown. Why are they moving into the downtown? Many of those young people grew up in the second ring of suburbs. And they've decided they want something fundamentally different from how they grew up. Forget it, I don't want to own a car. They're not getting driver's licenses. I live in the heart of the city, just north of the downtown core. I have an 18-year-old daughter. When I turned 16, on my birthday, I went and got my driver's license, on my birthday, because a license was freedom. My daughter is 18. She has been entitled by law to drive for 2 years. She does not have her driver's license. Every once in a while it comes up at the dinner table, maybe you should get your license. That would be really helpful if you had your driver's license. And she says, well, yeah, maybe I should. But she doesn't need her driver's license. It's not an instrument of freedom in our city anymore because she has excellent access to transit. She has excellent access to Uber. And we live in a neighborhood where she can do a whole variety of things within walking distance of home. She walks to the dentist, she walks to the doctor, she walks when we send her on errands to pick something up from the butcher. She walks to run those errands for us as a family. When we design our cities in a fundamentally different way, we in fact begin to attract and retain young people who are conscious about living in a more sustainable way, who are not interested in spending money on insurance and cars. Different choices are being made by a new generation that are transforming our cities for the better. But we actually won't capitalize on that trend and change unless we plan for it. And here you see, if you look in the center of the slide, 2001 to 2006, 1% of our regional growth was going into the downtown core. In just 10 years, we've shifted that. The number's now 25% of our growth is going into the core. This wouldn't have happened without the green belt. The green belt is essential, but what it's doing is attracting businesses into the core as well. International headquarters want to be near those young people want to walk to work. In our downtown, 75% of those 250,000 people walk or cycle or take transit to work. No cars, no parking needed, no impact on the infrastructure, very, very small impact. It's a very efficient way to plan a city. This was our city in 2005. Watch the slide closely. 10 years later, this is the change that's taken place in our city. And in 10 years, it will change again with a similar amount. We're actually dealing with an issue right now, which is super tall buildings. When I was chief planner, I had an application came in, was on one city block for 3 towers that were 90 stories tall. This is becoming a regularity, where we are dealing with this question of superdensity and how superdensity is impacting quality of life. But what matters more than the height of a building is the way density delivers an urban life at the street level. So here you see one of our newest streets that we're very proud of, Queens Quay, right along our waterfront. A significant amount of space has been given over to the public realm, also to commerce and to retail. We have separated cycling infrastructure within 6 months of opening. We had a 600% increase in the number of cyclists. Our problem in this corridor right now is that there's congestion in the cycling lanes. This is a problem. There's too many cyclists. And of course, using our streetcar infrastructure more efficiently by putting our streetcars where we can in their own right-of-way. So as we add that density, we have to transform the streets. The streets have to become something different, and this is directly linked to a higher quality of life. More time walking, more time shopping, more time in street-side cafes. That 45 to an hour average that people spend commuting, 45 minutes a day, that is time spent in a street-side cafe if you live in the core of the city. Think about getting that time back. And we're also investing in our public spaces. If we add density, first of all, we need to know where it doesn't go. You can see some heritage buildings protected in our St. Lawrence neighborhood here, and you can see in the background some of the mid-rise buildings. This has become a very dense neighborhood. So we've had to increase and redesign and rethink the public spaces that become the anchor of community and neighborhood life. So I painted a pretty rosy picture, but in fact, I'd like to suggest that there have been unintended consequences. That in fact, there are unintended consequences that you can today learn from. We can be a cautionary tale for Ohio. And you can plan today for some of the unintended consequences that we didn't quite realize were going to threaten the integrity of our city and our region. And this is the first one. You see 1980, the first graph. The light yellow is the middle class. Red are areas of poverty, and blue are areas of wealth, high-income areas. Now look at 1980 on one side of the screen, and now look at 2010. What's happened? More poverty, more wealth, much, much less of the middle class. We have become a city of extremes. This is an outcome of our success. This is an outcome of opening our doors and welcoming change. 15 years ago, you could buy a house in the city of Toronto, an average size house for about $350,000, 15 years ago. Today, it's $1 million. The average house price is $1 million in the city. This presents a great risk to the thriving of our city. International businesses coming to our city, they want to know where those young people will live and how they will afford to live in our city. I say this because you can get out ahead of this problem, but you need to begin today. This is a slide that just reinforces the wealth is accelerating and the poverty is accelerating in concert at the same time. This is a risk that, again, you can mitigate with strategies today. Here you can see the real average house price in the city of Toronto. And what this has done is it's demanded new responses on our part, and I'll talk about that in the middle, how we're seeking to address this, to ensure that prosperity is shared and to ensure that the entire economic system in our city, which relies on being able to access employment, whether it be teachers in our school system being able to live in the neighborhoods where they teach, or whether it's nurses and assistant staff in hospitals being able to live close to the hospitals that are in our downtown core. Now, there's a whole series of trends that push and pull us. And I'm not going to go through all of those trends, but they really come up in 3 categories. And I wanted to flag this because I'm actually going to talk about just 4 ideas. And what I wanted to identify was that you can pull your region, you can pull your city building in a whole variety of different directions by looking at these trends. And just look at some of these trends that could drive your city building. It could be public health, it could be increasing access to digital lifestyles, the need to address urban inequality, or there's economic trends, wanting to focus on the digital economy or the sharing economy, or needing to address unemployment. Those trends can drive our city building. And then, of course, there's technological trends that can drive our city building. Autonomous vehicles is something that's talked about a lot, and I'll talk about that a bit more in my presentation. And the key idea that I want to share with you with respect to autonomous vehicles is that planning a city for autonomous vehicles is no different from planning your city from any other kind of car. Still planning your city around cars. And that's a fundamentally different premise than planning your city around transit, walking, and urban densities that allow people to live close to where they work, living and designing for complete communities. And what I'd like to suggest is that there's all these trends, social, economic, and technological, but there are a few city building basics that are timeless. They're not trends. They're timeless, and it's just 4 ideas. And what I'd like to suggest is that when we focus on these 4 ideas and we don't lose sight of them, we share prosperity across our region, and we secure the idea that growth will in fact be beneficial, as opposed to growth being something that will detract from our overall livability. So I'd like to suggest that this is a really good place at this moment in your history to start. And the first is this, it's around better transit and mobility. If you assume that everyone needs a car to get everywhere in your city, and you assume that you're going to grow at an astronomical rate, you're going to need a lot more roads and a lot more parking. But cities run into this catch-22, because the more cars you have and the more parking you have, the less space you have for city life. Those 2 things bump up on each other. It's a physics problem. And this is where a choice needs to be made, a strategic choice. Is your city for people? And if your city is going to be for people and built around urban density, then you need to rethink the place of the car in designing that city and thinking about mobility much more broadly. And we know that part of this is about economic development. This is about recognizing that those, what we call eco-boomers, people between the ages of 18 and 34, who are making critical choices about where they want to live, they want to walk more frequently, they want to bike more frequently, they want to take transit. Like my daughter, yeah, I'll get my license when I get around to it. But right now, I'm calling an Uber to go meet my friends. If we want to plan our city for the future, we shouldn't be planning it, I hate to say it, for most of us in this room. We need to be thinking about transformative change that is future-oriented. And that transformative change that is future-oriented is about density and transit. It's also about recognizing that if we plan walkable communities, the vast majority of people will walk, which is the most efficient way to get from point to point. Without density, you really can't walk anywhere. I'm very fortunate. I live right in the center of Toronto in Midtown. And when I moved into my neighborhood, we moved there because it's very close to a subway, and I wanted to be able to be on the rapid transit. We also have LRT that's being built just a stone's throw from our house, which is fabulous. When we moved into our neighborhood, I was flabbergasted. The very first Valentine's Day, my husband and I decided, of course, to go out for dinner. So we opened the front door and we walked outside and we started walking to one of the many restaurants. There's literally hundreds of restaurants within walking distance of my house. And it was amazing to look down the street, and 2 by 2, there were couples all walking out to a restaurant for Valentine's Day. When we create walking as a mobility choice, and this gets back to how we plan land, everything from the regional level in the Greenbelt to the design of neighborhoods and getting density right in neighborhoods, when we design our neighborhoods for walking, it's by far the most pleasant choice. It's a choice that's the healthiest, It doesn't cost anything, and it results in communities where you know your neighbors. I live in a city of 2.8 million people. Never thought I would ever say that. I grew up in a relatively small town. I know more people on my street and in my neighborhood now than I did in the small town I grew up in. Because in that town I grew up in, we drove everywhere. You got out of your house into your car and you drove out the driveway. But today, I walk to the subway, I walk to the grocery store, we walk to the movie theater. I meet my neighbors on the street all the time. And there's a community fabric that is a result of being able to choose walking. This raises a question for most of us, and it raised a question for us in Toronto, which was, how can we adapt our streets? How can we adapt our streets for cyclists, and how can we adapt our streets for transit? Because we will not create an environment where people can choose walking if we do not go through this fundamental adaptation. And part of it begins with having new design goals for our streets. The old model was seeing streets as being for moving cars. That's the then scenario. Streets were about moving cars. The new design goal is an outside-in approach, which is recognizing that streets are for mobility, not just for cars, they're for people. The streets are for economic development. Streets are for community. Streets are also for health and public safety. Cars designed for drivers tend not to be very safe streets for cyclists and for pedestrians. So we need to have new design goals if we want to adapt our streets to make walking a true choice in this region. Now, we have a series of initiatives that are underway in Toronto. The Union Pearson Express is a heavy rail train that we've built linking our airport, I say this with reason, linking our airport to our downtown core. So in 20 minutes on a high-speed train, you can get downtown to the airport. We've also been extending our subway system. We've been revitalizing our Union Station, which is the key hub. 68% of the employees coming into the core of the city, that's about 500,000 people, which will grow over the next 10 years to be 750,000 people coming into the heart of the city. 68% today, and that number will only continue to go up, arrive on transit. Well, of course they do, because if they arrived in cars, the whole downtown would be overrun with parking. So we've redesigned the streets and designed the downtown in such a way that it's possible to arrive primarily on transit and have a very high quality of life. Now I'm going to talk a little bit more about Eglinton Connects, which is where we're adding 22 kilometers of LRT right through the heart of the city. Now, we talk about adding transit, but the reality is there's a whole variety of components that we need to get right. It's not just about transit. It's also about walking and cycling and about the densities that will support transit. I think that your new pass to give for 45,000 residents where they get a transit pass from their employer is brilliant. But I think it needs to go a step farther. You have to ensure that you have bus frequencies that make taking transit a real choice. Frequencies often determine whether or not people will use transit. So you can look at a transit map and go, wow, that city's got a fabulous network of transit. But if the bus only runs every 15 minutes, really? You're gonna go out, what if you miss the bus? You're gonna have to stand at the side of the road for 15 minutes. It's not a real choice. So frequency of transit matters just as much as where you put the lines. You do not get frequencies if you don't have density. You need density so that there's lots of people using that transit. Because if you increase the frequencies and there's not a lot of people, the buses are running empty. So density, frequency, and transit are all linked. And if you take one away, you cannot create a transit-oriented region. Part of this is also about ensuring that the street design is designed for pedestrians. That really makes it very clear that pedestrians belong in urban places. And I really think Columbus Common and the whole corridor down to your waterfront is one of the best examples I've seen of this type of redesign and transformation and shifting the priorities being away from cars to being about the public realm and public space. It's also about recognizing that unless you have critical mass and you get the design details right, and one of the questions you should struggle with is where density is going and whether you're adding enough density in key areas to really enhance the transit service. If you don't add that density, the risk, of course, is that you can never make the transit a first choice for anyone. So we face this challenge in Toronto. I'll show you in a minute what our original, the yellow line that you see in the center, kind of the U-shaped, is our existing subway network, our subway line. And we've approved by City Council, this is our new rapid transit plan for the City of Toronto. And some of it is currently being built. The blue line at the bottom is LRT along the waterfront. The orange line right through the center, 22 kilometers of LRT, the entire street is torn up, it's being built right now, but it has another 10 kilometers going out to our suburbs and another 10 kilometers on the other side going out to our airport. It includes LRT in the suburbs. It includes bus rapid transit. It also includes streetcars in its own right-of-way, and it also includes heavy rail as well as buses. So we have all those different technologies that you can access with one integrated fare. And the goal is to be able to get anywhere to anywhere on transit. And I would argue that we already can do that, but this transit plan is about filling the gaps. It's about adding more of the infrastructure. But before I get ahead of myself, this is Vienna's map. This is Vienna's map. And in Vienna, you can ride for $1 a day this transit system. If you live in Vienna, you can buy a pass, $1, you can go anywhere in the entire system within a day. When council made this change, they actually saw their revenue go up because people were like, oh, it's $1 a day, I'm gonna buy a pass. So their revenues shot through the roof. And in Vienna, there is such a finely grained rapid transit network that you can come up beside your destination almost anywhere. But it works because of density. It works because Vienna is a mid-rise city. There's no one-story buildings or two-story buildings. The entire city is mid-rise. So the densities result in a transit system that makes taking transit not just a first choice, but an excellent choice. It's an excellent way to get from one place to the next. Now, this is the City of Toronto. This is our existing network. This is the dark black line is our subway routes. The lines that you see in red are our streetcar routes. And this is, in fact, the challenge that we face. Right now, it's very long on transit. It's still shorter to commute by car. We have 1.8 million people riding our transit system on a daily basis. Our system is overloaded. This is where you can learn from us. We're now building out that transit network plan because we added the density, we accommodated the growth, but we didn't build the transit infrastructure. Not having the transit infrastructure means the growth will be constrained in the future. And this is, just for interest, this is the Vienna transit system overlaid on top of the City of Toronto. City of Toronto is 2.8 million people, but Vienna is 1.8. And this is the transit system, the rapid transit system that currently exists there. So a critical part of really becoming a transit-oriented region is about urbanizing avenues. It's about adding density, your corridor study, adding density and Main Street. So this is what this looks like in Toronto. This is in one of our suburbs. When I'm in front of a Canadian audience, I actually say when this slide comes up, this is anywhere USA. So I won't say that in front of you. We have a little bit of anywhere USA in Toronto, but we're going to change it. And we're beginning with the LRT. You can see the LRT that's going right down the center. We're building out a green trackway. We're widening the sidewalks. We're adding cycling lanes on either side. We're adding green infrastructure along the corridor, and then we're adding urban density. We're adding a mid-rise form. This plan has been approved by City Council. The LRT is currently under construction. So this is what that looks like at grade today, and this is what that will look like in the future. It's about creating a fundamentally different kind of quality of life. Ironically, this is very expensive infrastructure that you see in this slide today on a per capita basis. It's incredibly expensive because the vast majority of time those streets are not busy. They're very busy on a Saturday morning when everyone's going into the big box centers, very, very busy, but it's an underutilized form of infrastructure. It's very expensive for the street lights, the water, the sewer, the plumbing to be so underutilized. This is, in fact, a very efficient form of infrastructure, because you will see in this kind of an urban environment that the infrastructure is always being used. It's being used 24/7, particularly if you get the mix of uses right and the density right. And one of the challenges that we have right now is our development industry. We've planned this as a mid-rise environment, wants to see more. They want to see more density along this corridor, and we're trying to keep that mid-rise character and development. The second area is better parks and public spaces. And I will say that this is an area where you already excel. And it's been very exciting to see the work that you've been doing in the Columbus context. This is the heart of our city. This is where that 68% of residents, hundreds of thousands of people, take trains into the core of the city. And what's happened is it's created a rift. We have these tracks that act as a divide, and you can only get over. You can see a little bit in the middle of the slide, there's a yellow bridge. That's a pedestrian bridge to get residents from one side of the tracks to the other side of the tracks. So we are building a 23-acre park, and we've called it Rail Deck Park. We're bridging the gap. We've called it Rail Deck Park because we are in the engineering phase right now. We're essentially decking over top, and we're bridging the gap and creating a fundamentally new kind of public space right in the heart of the city. As cities densify, these are the new kinds of solutions that are in fact required. And you can see here how it will, it's kind of funny because in the beginning people were saying, oh, this will be like Central Park. It is in the central of our city, but Central Park is 400 acres. This is 23. So we're ambitious, but we simply don't have the space. And you can see the fabric of our downtown and the intensification that's taken place. As we've adapted industrial areas, we've struggled to find where the park space will go. And I think this is a critical opportunity in your region, is to have a very rich and robust public space plan now. If you exceed your growth targets over the next 10, 20 years, you will be grateful that you had a vision to protect the public space in advance. We're wedging the public space in afterwards because our growth completely exceeded our expectations. And here's another view of what that park will look like, healing, repairing that gap in the urban fabric of the city. Another project which is about repair, we have an expressway that runs right through the heart of our waterfront. That's what you see articulated there. You can see the different neighborhoods that have been built up adjacent to the expressway. So it too acts as a gap in the urban infrastructure. And what we have done is planned and designed a public space below this expressway to link the neighborhoods on either side of it. And this was this image here was the artist's rendering, and this is this past winter what this space looked like. And it has become an event space. It's also become a way to provide a linear connection through the heart of the city. You've done this. We're doing this now, rethinking our water's edge and investing in our water's edge because we recognize it as being an amenity that belongs to the entire region. So this is an example of a deck that we've built over the edge of a pier. It's been done in a very playful way because we're trying to create spaces for children in the heart of the city. This is another playful example of a redevelopment of the water's edge. This beach, by the way, it's impossible to get a chair on a nice day at this beach, whether it's during a weekday at lunch hour, people from the financial district come and sit in a Muskoka chair and kick off their shoes and put their feet into the sand. We're recreating sandy beaches along the city's edge. The third key basic opportunity I really think is around housing. One of the things we're doing is urbanizing our classic suburbs, gentle density and new housing types. This is a suburb that was built in the 1950s with a typical strip mall right at its center. This is what it looks like today. Very high-end. Some of the most beautiful suburban homes in our region are adjacent to this strip mall. It's an underutilization within the city, within our suburbs of our land. And it is currently under construction. It's being transformed. We're adding density. This is about new housing choices in our suburbs. This is about a destination. Look here, where can you walk if you in fact live in those suburbs? There's nowhere to walk. We're now creating a destination within our suburbs. We're creating new housing types, including housing for seniors and some affordable housing. We're putting all the parking underground and creating a new community plaza. So there is a destination for people within walking distance of home to enjoy their neighborhood and other amenities and shopping. We're also embracing the mid-rise city, completing our urban fabric to add livability. And we have pretty strict design guidelines in order to ensure we're protecting things like being able to walk and ensuring that we're not casting shadows. We're a winter city. We don't want to cast shadows on our sidewalks. And this is a map of the city of Toronto. All of the red dots, and if you were to count them, you would count about 62 of them, are mid-rise buildings that are currently under development. So while we have intensification in the core and high-rise buildings, there's over 100 high-rise buildings under development, we also have mid-rise buildings that are completing our urban fabric along our corridors, where we want to add that density in places where people can use transit as their first choice. So this is what some of that housing typology looks like. We're also focusing on detailed precinct planning. Now, some of you may have heard that Sidewalk Labs, an alphabet company of Google, ran a competition. They looked around the world, and they, in fact, now are working on 12.5 acres of our waterfront. That's the area that you see right in the foreground of this image. They are building out the test or the model smart city on the Toronto waterfront. The objective here is really to create the city of the future. Yes, autonomous vehicles will have a role to play, but it's really interesting if you look at this image because you'll know there's no vehicles. In the city of the future, the smart city of the future, it's not about cars and streetlights that have been synchronized. It's about places where people can walk from one use to the next and live in a complete community and do a whole variety of things within walking distance of home. And this is another example just farther south of the Sidewalk Labs development, where we've undertaken precinct planning, again, to advance the 21st century smart city. We recognize that thinking really carefully about where growth will go is essential to creating critical mass. This goes back to that green belt. If most of your growth is happening in a sprawling way, you're not going to be able to get the density to truly deliver on a walkable and transit-oriented city. You sort of can't suck and blow. You've got to take that growth and figure out how can we capitalize on this growth to create the future city. Part of this is about public-private partnerships, something that is the Columbus way. You excel in this already. This is an image from a development in Holland where 1/3 of the units are market, 1/3 of the units are affordable, and 1/3 of the units are social housing. And it's all fully integrated into one development. This is a private-public partnership that is ensuring no one is getting bumped out of a hot market. We're also hypersensitive about designing for families in vertical communities, ensuring that those millennials who currently are living in condos in the downtown core, everyone said 5 years ago, oh man, what happens when they all move out to the suburbs? Like when all those young people start having kids and they want to move out to the suburbs, we better be building tons of housing out in the suburbs because that's where they're going to go with their kids. So we asked a question. We did. We said, is that true? Do people always do what the generation before them did? Well, of course not. You can look at your parents and how they lived and how you're living today, and it's probably not the same. So we went out and we asked the young people who are having families in the core of the city, and we learned something fascinating. Despite the fact that often the neighborhoods aren't designed right or amenities are missing, they are not moving. In fact, many of them said to us, you know what, now that I've got kids, my walk to work matters more than anything. Why would I want to get in a car and drive for 45 minutes in the morning and in the evening when I've got kids? I want to walk my kids to the daycare, and then I want to walk to work, and then I want to walk home and get them from the daycare, and I want to walk to my condo, and I want a great neighborhood park where I can play with them because I'm not going to have a backyard because I'm going to be living in multifamily. So that raised the question for us, how can we create housing that is a first choice in urban environments for families? And that's exactly what we're doing here. What you see is a 25-acre park as part of a mid-rise community, and families are showing up in droves. And they're showing up because it's their first choice. They're showing up because living in an urban environment where they can walk from one thing to the next, supported by transit, offers a very high quality of life when we design the unit, the building, and the neighborhood to make it a really great choice. And this is another example of a project where we've mixed up the housing types, but this community is anchored by a massive new community center and community pool, because we recognize part of attracting families into the core is making sure that there's excellent amenities for family in the core. So this is a development that includes social housing, affordable housing, and market housing, and it has become one of the hottest new neighborhoods in the city to live. It's called Regent Park. And the note I'd like to leave you on is about governance. It's hard to change quickly. You might have people in your city and in your region who say, well, we can't be like those other cities because we really like our cars here. You know, that's our history. That's who we are. I cannot find a city in North America that doesn't actually say that. That's our story too. We're a car city too. And it's hard to change. It's hard to get people to buy into a fundamentally different vision of the future. But if it's a future that's going to be more prosperous, if it's a future that's going to lead to more investment, and if it's a future that's going to include more people in keeping with the welcoming nature that we want to be, then we need to figure out how to plan in such a way that we're building capacity for that growth, that people aren't afraid of that growth, that people are willing to go, hey, I never thought I would like this, but it turns out I do. I never could have imagined raising my family in a condo, but I'm actually discovering it's wonderful. How do you get there? Well, it's by having more inclusive governance. It's critical that we're building capacity. And so we've created a whole series of mechanisms to work with the community in order to build ownership over this growth and ownership over this change. This is our planning review panel, which is representative of all the ethnicities, all the ages, the genders, owners, renters in our city that provides planning policy advice to the city planning department. We have an initiative called Reset TO, which is all about comprehensive neighborhood planning. What happens if you add too much growth but you don't add enough parks and schools? It's a big risk. So comprehensive neighborhood planning is critical. I've held, over the course of the past 5 years, chief planner roundtables that are all about bringing developers, academics, business experts, and people developing policy together in the same room to identify what are the interests we share. What do we all care about that we can all advance together? And we've talked about everything from improving transit in the suburbs to building a more resilient city and dealing with flooding in these roundtables. And they're wildly popular. We always run out of space. We have an overflow room. They're televised. They trend nationally. They've been very popular precisely because they're the Columbus way. They're all about collaborations. They're about bringing all the players to the table to have a conversation about how we are going to grow. Because we don't want to leave anyone behind and make change that doesn't make sense to the residents who live in the city. And that's also about planners in public space, working with younger demographics. We created an initiative which is all about going out to the public and working with the public, not when we're necessarily proposing something specific, which is usually when people want to fight about it, but to talk about the vision of the city, to talk about whether change is good and how change can be good. And we find that when we have those conversations at the higher level, we're able to advance a vision for the city that is based on our shared interests. And part of that links into another initiative called Growing Conversations, which has a whole series of different threads, which includes working with various ethnic communities that are traditionally excluded from planning processes, have a hard time accessing the language and the dialogue of city planning. And the last thing I want to leave you with this. If you grow a lot, you could become a big city. You're becoming that. There's probably things you've liked about the size you are today. If you get your planning right, you will create fabulous neighborhood life. That's what you will get right. You will create neighborhoods for walking, neighborhoods for knowing your neighbors. You will become something even better than you are today. But you have a whole series of strategic choices that you need to make in order to get there. Thank you.
Jennifer, thank you. Thank you, everybody. We look forward to working with you throughout the year. That's it. That's the state of the region. Thank you. Have a great afternoon.